Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Let's Talk Politics on this Thursday evening. I'm your host, Eddie Layne, and this evening we are going to, as we usually do, address the topical political issues in our country. And of course, we are going to share information necessary to you with regards to what is happening in our country outside of the politics in terms of governance, in terms of responding to the flooding across the country, and as usual, to to respond and to put to rest many lies, misinformation, non-truths that are being told by the desperate opposition. I have with me this evening, and of course, before I introduce my guest, a lot of tonight's program will be focused on something that is has been anticipated for quite a long time. A lot of Guyanese are breathing a sigh of relief because they've seen movement in a direction in which they always want us to go, and that is to deal with those who were blatantly, nakedly involved in attempts to rig our national elections. I have with me this evening to discuss some of these issues no other than Sase Gunraj. Sase is a commissioner of the Ghana Elections Commission and an attorney at law. Sase, good evening. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Good evening, Eddie. Good evening to your viewers as well. It's my pleasure to be here.
Says within the last few hours, we have seen developments that I think is very pleasing to a lot of Guyanese who are committed, Guyanese who are feel strongly about protecting and defending our democracy. We saw motions being tabled at the level of the Ghana Elections Commission to have three persons from the secretariat of that commission, uh, Roxanne Myers, Keith Lowenfield, and of course, the gentleman by the name of Claremont Mingo, the returning officer for Region 4, to have them dismissed immediately because of their role in attempting to steal our elections. First, I'm going to give you a chance um, to speak directly to the motion, and then we will talk about some of the things that we recognize happening after and some of the unfounded claims that are being made.
All right, so Eddie, good evening again to you. Good evening to your viewers. Um, the motions have made their rounds in the public arena. They were publicized in all of the newspapers. All of the traditional and social media have publicized the motions in their entirety. And I think that the motions speak for themselves. They are pretty detailed, and they elaborate in, inherently in them all of the grounds and the bases upon which the dismissal, the immediate dismissal of those three officers of the Elections Commission is sought, and the reasons why that motion was moved. But any a motion, or the motions that were filed were are formalities which detail the reasons. This nation and perhaps the world witnessed the shenanigans that were perpetuated and what was attempted, the insidious attempt by the well, now opposition, but by one contestant in those elections, fully fully endorsed and fully orchestrated by these three primary actors. And I think months ago, in an interview with you, I did promise the Guyanese public that this was coming. Uh, I don't think we would come as a shock to anyone. I think the shock has come. The shock is why it took so long. But uh, as I always say, I give, while I advocate patience, everything happens at the right time, and this is the correct time for these motions to be tabled at the level of the commission.
There. All right. Thanks, Assis, for your opening comments there with regards to the motion. But I think we ventilated enough on the motion last evening. We had some discussions on the motion. And of course, you touched briefly there on the motion itself, and as you rightly said, um, the motion is really the formality. The Guyanese people know exactly what happened on first, the 5th of March, and then on the 13th of March, and then everything that happened after. And I spoke earlier, says, about a video I saw circulating. I'm not going to bring the video in now, and I will not ask you to comment on that video, but to show, and I think that video will come after the next issue I wanted to raise with you regarding these motions to have these three persons dismissed. But I think Guyanese people know the evidence is before the nation, the evidence is before the world. Um, we still have those videos. Matter of fact, today I was looking at my computer and I had the videos, all the videos compiled of everything that happened during that period. I was looking at every little piece of video there, including what happened at the Ashman's building, what happened at the GECOM headquarters, what happened at the recount, and all of it. So the evidence is before this nation with regards to what the role that Mingo, Mayors, as well as Lowingfield played in those in the naked attempts to rig the elections. And note I'm saying attempts because it wasn't just one occasion. It was several occasions during that 5 month period. But despite the evidence laid bare before the world, you have Vincent Alexander, and Minister Indar, I want to welcome you, but I'm going to bring you in just a bit. You have Vincent Alexander has the audacity to say to the people of this country and to say to the world that the attempts to remove these three riggers from GECOM, these three people who there is evidence, tremendous evidence to show they had a role in the attempts to rig the elections. Vincent Alexander crawled out from under some rock, apparently, to tell the world and to tell the nation that this seems to be a racist motive to remove these three persons from
So,
GECOM. Is this guy
Eddie,
for real? Yes.
Eddie, I'm chomping at the bit to deal with the tripe that is usually peddled by Alexander. But before I get there, let me temper my anxiety for a moment to deal with this specific issue. Briefly, I want to briefly go through these motions and make some brief comments on it. Because like I said, the motions speak for themselves. It requires no gloss, and they contain, I believe, sufficient detail for even the most ordinary and uninformed reader to understand what is sought and the reasons why that end result is sought. But I've always said on these programs and for the public, and even in the commission and at every forum, legal or otherwise, that elections are statutory events. Elections are statutory in nature. Every single aspect of an election is contained in law. And I dare say, in very simple language, for the requisite players and the persons tasked with executing the functions set out in the law, to carry them out in a clear, impartial, and effective manner, so as to achieve the result set out by those elections. And when I say result, free, fair, incredible elections, and elections that are free from fear. Now, that being said, these elections 2020 were perhaps have the distinction of being the most litigated elections in the world. Because when you look in the Commonwealth from which we draw our common law, etc., you see you scarcely find one election that has had so much court matters subtending from it. But we had this. The reason I am mentioning the plethora of legal challenges that the 2020 elections were subject to is because even if aspects of the legislation which governs the operation, the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 103 of the Laws of Guyana, even if those aspects were unclear, every single critical part of that legislation was determined and judicially discussed. Courts have pronounced upon them and made it very clear. It started with the first action that was filed, Riaz Holadar, in which the Chief Justice called Mingo to court and explained to him in person and in public what he needed to do on the 13th of March. He went and did the complete opposite the same night, and again falsely declared. The court spoke about Lowenfield in detail, said he's subject to the direction and control of the commission. He's not a lone ranger. How the votes must be calculated, etc. He devised his own methods. He devised, as head of the secretariat and in control of the electoral machinery, devised his own methods. You had Roxanne Myers, who was his deputy, there alongside him as he carried out those nefarious activities and perpetuated those nefarious acts without any resort or any position being taken on this. How does anyone countenance this kind of activity and this kind of behavior? And then now fast forward to your question. You have people of the likes of Vincent Alexander who sat in a commission. And I always say, this did not begin from the 2nd of March, This began months before, years perhaps before, when the shenanigans started with the unlawful appointment of Patterson. And it's not unlawful because Sase Gunraj says so. It is unlawful because the highest court in the hierarchical structure of courts of Guyana, the Caribbean Court of Justice, pronounced upon that. And as a consequence, he had to leave office. They said that Patterson was unlawfully appointed. And then you look at the series of acts in which he was involved, the role he played in the appointment of Myers, the role he played in unlawfully commencing a house-to-house registration, another act that the court struck down. And if time permits, I will go into the Ethnic Relations Commission report on the racially improper hiring practices of the Guyana Elections Commission, and when they specifically pronounced on Roxanne Myers. And in addition to that, you'll recall the statements that the said Vincent Alexander made in relation to Vishnu Prasad, the dead incumbent, who, by the way, the comment from the Ethnic Relations Commission study conducted by no other person than Stanley Moore, eminent jurist, senior lawyer, to say that Vishnu Prasad was the most qualified person. Now, when you look at these things and you look at the actions, the precursor to elections 2020, and then post March 2nd, when you had the likes of Alexander and his two cohorts on the commission there and not finding any fault, in fact, decided they thought that what Lowenfield did was excellent. They never faulted this. And they never found fault with what Mingo did. But now come when these motions are tabled to say that they are racially motivated. Eddie, when I read that article this morning, the first thing that came to mind was when the only tool that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that, if you look at all the comments, not only Alexander, if you look at the entire opposition and their comments, it's nothing else about race. everything is viewed through those race-colored lenses, right? So the only hammer they have is race. So every issue that is presented to themselves is a hammer that is a nail that has to be lashed with race. They have failed to see reason. And this again demonstrates a condemnation of an acquiescence by those persons uh, to the nefarious activities of that gang of Mingo, Myers, and Lowenfield.
Is, I'm going to bring you in here, Minister Indar, because you've been part and parcel of this entire process for the 5 months. I know you're here to talk about the floods and the government's response, but I don't think you would want to miss the opportunity to respond to the likes of Alexander and the others who, like Sase rightly said, everything is seen through racist lens. And when we get down to talk about the flood response, we will show again, we'll demonstrate again, and we'll expose again how they're using race. But before I bring you in to get your comments, I just want to take the opportunity to say congratulations. I see you've ended up on the cover of the ACCA magazine. I think it is. I think probably you're the first Guyanese to have been featured by that magazine, and more so on the cover. So congratulations there. Let me bring you in quickly. You heard what Stacey said, and I figure you read the article, which is headlined, by the way, it was headlined, planned dismissal of Lowenfield, Myers, and Mingo, racially motivated, according to Alexander. This guy just woke up, man. I don't think, I think he missed everything during the elections, says Minister Indar.
About racism is a reason or a play for the motion to dismiss Lowenfield, Myers, and Mingo. No, it's not racism. These guys play the racism card to get sympathy from supporters, gullible supporters, and they should stop fooling people. They should stop fooling Guyanese people. Guyanese people are smart. They know what happened following the March 2020 elections. People saw with their own eyes what happened. And that should be rejected. Their own supporters should start rejecting them for being, irresponsible leaders. Vincent Alexander sit at a position on the Elections Commission on behalf of the PNC or the APNUAFC. And to tell people that Mingo, Myers, and Lowenfield, the motion for their dismissal is racial is utter nonsense. Mingo tried to rig the election over and over and over. Myers was in there. Myers was part and parcel of that whole operation. We met Myers when we were in Ashman's building. Myself, the AG, and at the time, President-elect Irfan Ali went to our office when Mingo was downstairs talking about reading from a spreadsheet. And then you have Lowenfield, who hemming and hawing all the time to put a returning officer after Mingo fake his illness. Then Lowenfield brings some reports after when the recount was finished. Total nonsense they did. Sitting in offices that supposed to represent integrity and honesty. You are elections commission. You're supposed to count the people vote. Now count who you want to count and report what you want to count. And that was what they were doing. Now you have people like Vincent Alexander coming and say they're being the motion for dismiss is racially motivated. I mean, come on, man. You've been sleeping all the time. In fact, they weren't sleeping. What this does, Eddie and says, is speak to the value system of people and people like Vincent Alexander. It speaks to the value system. If you're gonna defend those kind of wrongs, those kind of blatant rigging of elections, try to steal an entire country, it speaks to the value system of Vincent Alexander and those of his kind. Because anybody who represent rigging is not fit to be in democratic societies. Listen, the government of the day then They control all of the apparatus, the army, the police, the soldiers, all of the institutions. They control everything. The only thing the common man had at his disposal was his one vote. And here you are, these guys want to force Strange Lowenfield try to reduce the number of voters by 115,000. Then the next time he come back with another report is another big fancy figure, 88,000, something like this here. Thousands of votes they're trying to disenfranchise people. And here you are talking about racially motivated. No. The actions of Lowenfield, the actions of Myers, and the actions of Mingo is what is at test here. And they should be fired long now. I mean, the GECOM chair is asking them to show good reason why they shouldn't be fired. They should be fired long now. The Guyanese people are tired of them. This is an elections commission. If anybody else in the world has done something like this, they would already be in jail, not just fired alone. They would have been in jail. How can we continue to develop as a country when every single election cycle you have this kind of fears? People got to go through this kind of trauma that, they're going to vote and the vote will not be counted. They're going to vote and have election violence. They're going to vote and somebody's going to try to rig. You can't continue to develop a country like this. We are a producing nation now. We have people from all over the world investing their hard-earned money in this country so that it could develop, so that it can be an economic prosperity for everybody. You can't have people trying to rig elections every 5 years. And that is what these guys are doing. And then you have Vincent Alexander talking about race. But that is the whole 30,000 feet strategy of the AP and UAFC all along. They are the PNC. Their only strategy is race. They have a particular base that don't move left or right. Has always been there supporting them. And that is what they normally throw as red meat to them. So that anytime they have an issue, race is the reason why why they are where they are. They're in opposition. And they're not in opposition because of race. They're in opposition because they did a terrible job in government. They raised taxes on people. They raised plenty taxes on people. They taxed the blood out of people. They didn't manage the economy properly. They didn't manage the oil and gas sector properly. They didn't fight for local content. A whole host of travesty that they did when they were in office. They didn't meet out the people. You'd never see them walking in the streets helping people. When you try to reach them, you can't reach them. They're in opposition because of their record, not because of anything else. So we have to call a spade a spade. And Guyanese people need to get on board. This thing about division and so on, it only does more harm to the country, Eddie. It only does more harm to the country. We gotta, every time, there's got a saying, fire don't get rid of fire, Water gets rid of fire. So you can't fight fire with fire. So every time they call about racism, we speak about unity. Every time they talk about division, we talk about cohesion, right? And we do it by deeds, not by just words. We go on the streets, we go to the houses, we meet the people in the corner of the street, and that is how we're going to transform the country, brick by brick, person by person, and do it in a sincere manner. I'll stop there for now.
Thanks, Minister. And says, while I've been going through the story with Alexander, I don't want us to belabor too much on him because I think the guy, the entire AP and UFC, all of them are going crazy, including people like Alexander. Because if you're going to watch the hundreds of pieces of videos that are in the public domain that show clearly who were the players in the attempts to rig the elections. And then you have Alexander coming out to say that this has nothing to do with the elections. This is really ethnic cleansing at GECOM. The reality is, maybe you wouldn't want to say it, but and I think Bishop Edgel made the point last evening on a program, that if Afro-Guyanese were involved in the attempts to rig the elections, you cannot fire a Chinese or an Amerindian or a European. You have to move to fire who were involved. If it so happens they're Afro-Guyanese, what do you do?
let me make a
Are you going
comment.
to slap people on the wrist and allow them because you fear this question, this taboo issue of race?
Let me make let me make a comment on that, Eddie. And it's very poignant that you'd make that in that article quoted in the Emrar Waves. Uh, I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote anyone. It made reference to uh, issues raised by then Commissioner Ben, as he then was, about the ethnic composition of the employment force of GECOM. And when when comments were made on that, the likes of Alexander quickly pointed out, or their retort was that the hiring practices of the commission was based on meritocracy. So if they contended that if merit allows these persons, persons predominantly of one ethnicity to be employed, then so be it, because it was based on meritocracy and not on race. Then if the predominance or the preponderance of persons who were engaged in the rigging process happen to be of one particular race, doesn't that same uh, principle apply? Or has it suddenly gone out? What's good for the goose is no longer good for the gander. And this is the kind of double speak and forked tongue with which people like Alexander speak. But like you quite rightly said, they are seeking relevance, Eddie. And the more we digress and dwell on the nonsense that they spew, it only gives them more relevance. It's sheer nonsense that they're talking.
And um, says this brings to the fore the whole issue of the hiring of Myers, which led to a complaint to the ERC, and I think the details of the ERC report.
You know,
Is it your
Eddie,
possibility?
allow me very quickly, now that you've raised that, I want to quote I want to quote two or three quick uh, I want to quote two or three very quick uh, aspects of the conclusion of the ERC report, right? Um, and I want to read how the Justice Moore um, prefaced these conclusions and said, and I quote, "In arriving at our conclusions, we strove mightily to be as objective as humanly possible. We sought to support every finding upon the basis of an accepted document or upon the written transcripts of all the proceedings. In the main, we have reproduced the speaker's own words, rather than a paraphrase of what we thought the speaker might have said. By this process, we concluded that by all objective criteria, Mr. Prasad was, on the available evidence, the most qualified candidate for appointment to the position of DCU. 2. By long established practice, the candidate acquiring the highest score secured the appointment. 3. Save and except the case of Mr. Gokul Budu, all appointments were made based upon the unanimous vote of all commissioners. 4. Before the Myers incident, the vote of the chairman had broken a voting deadlock only once before in GECOM. Mr. Prasad was the first candidate in the history of GECOM who had obtained the highest score and had not been appointed. Now, on this issue of race, this is what they found. Because of the way our population is distributed over the country, it is inevitable that in some areas where there's a preponderance of Guyanese of a given ethnicity, that there's likely to be a majority of employees in those areas of the majority ethnicity. Now, when you see that, and you see how Alexander insisted on having Myers there, and how they secured the acquiescence of Patterson If that was not motivated by race and not meritocracy, then what? How can it then be explained? How can it then be explained? This ERC report contains, in tabular manner, a comparison, a comparison of the qualifications, work experience, and working knowledge, and special seminars and conferences of the two candidates, Myers and Passad. So when they said, you know what they said in this report, and I quote about Roxanne Myers? Qualifications: Masters of Arts in Gender and Peace Building from the University of Peace in Costa Rica. Work experience: the only information available is in association with the Media Monitoring Unit, an NGO. No information on working knowledge. No information on special seminars and conferences. On the contrary, you had the other candidate who had an MBA from the Anglia Ruskin University in the UK, level 5 certificate from the Institute of Management UK, and all these other things. He had relevant experience at GECOM, PRO, personal assistant to the chairman, DCEO 2014 to 2017. On the working experience, has a good working knowledge of the computers and very familiar with the data requirements at GECOM. Special seminars, elections related conferences in India and England, and was a course lead in the Indian conference. Now, as I said then and as I say now, I had no dog in the race. I wanted to see the most qualified candidate fill that position. I said it in the commission. I said it when I made submissions to the Ethnic Relations Commission. I said it publicly then, and I'm saying publicly now. What the basis? And you know, it's very funny. It's very funny. Alexander made certain public statements about the qualifications of Vishnu Prasad. Vishnu Prasad sued him for defamation and won. And won. I won, and I should ask publicly whether Alexander paid Vishnu Prasad his judgment.
But interestingly, before I bring you in here, Minister Indar, I'm going to go back to what you just read. And I think you were reading from conclusion, it's labeled here, item 126 in the report. And the very first bullet point that you read says, by all objective criteria, Mr. Prasad was, on the available evidence, the most qualified candidate for the appointment to the position of DCEO. So, what is the justification from Alexander? And you made the point. What is the justification? The second point that you made, which supports the position now that I mentioned earlier. If they're saying, and in this report it says that if because of the way of our population, the distribution of population, it is inevitable that in some area where there is a preponderance of Guyanese of a given ethnicity, majority employees will be. Let us take that argument, says that in Region 4, in Georgetown, there is more Afro-Guyanese, and more Afro-Guyanese candidates emerged and were able to secure jobs at GECOM. On the flip side, and in the case of the 2020 elections, the employees of GECOM who were involved in the attempts to rig the elections automatically and naturally, the majority will be Afro-Guyanese. In this case, it was only Afro-Guyanese. So I don't know who exactly GECOM should fire. I don't know who exactly criminal charges should be brought against. I don't know if Minister Indar, if you could help us out here. If I'm not too sure who you're going to charge. You can't charge a Chinese for a crime committed by somebody else. Apparently, that is what Alexander wants.
Yeah, but these are what we call rabbit holes, and we gotta be careful about them, right? So here is the thing that we must always step back and look at the entire forest rather than in the trees. So Vincent Alexander came out to make this outrageous, cantankerous, crazy, stupid statement about race. And here we are spending an entire episode dedicated to Alexander. That is what Alexander wants. He wants us to talk about him. He wants us to be there. So they come and they make these nonsensical statements in the media, and we have to debunk them. We have to, discredit them, and we have to put up the alternative, which is actually the truth. So these guys know exactly what they're doing. So from time to time, we really got to call them out from the get-go, stop them and move on. Because we will talk about people that have no good in terms of what they project for the country. They have no positive thinking. They have no strategy of taking Guyana forward. All they do is make these kind of statements that are wild, outrageous, so that it will attract some kind of commentary from us. We got to be mindful of that. In the military strategy, they call it psyops. So we got to be very careful of how much airtime we give them to. And we need to discuss the issues that really mean something to Guyanese people. Because I will tell you this, Eddie, I think, not to presume, but I think if you do a census or a simple survey of how people are fed up with this race talk and this race behavior, whilst they're in a COVID-19 environment and the business taking a licking, they ain't got a job, they can't make it to pay the bills, the house getting foreclosed, the children ain't to go to school properly because in a COVID environment. Those are the real problems people want to hear about. How are we solving those? And we got to be careful if we go and drift off into something with Alexander and the usual crazy ramblings and
Allow
people
me,
of Alexander kind, and deal
Minister,
with the
allow me,
issues that are struggling, cause a struggle to Guyanese.
Minister, allow me to do some of the moderator work this evening. Eddie, I'm going to take up your position for a second. Minister, I've noticed you in the fields quite admirably, as along with several of your cabinet colleagues, led by no less a person than His Excellency the President, doing remarkable work at first of all identifying the needs of citizens affected by the recent flooding, and second of all, reacting to those needs by providing assistance and requisite relief. You're correct. The likes of Alexander want us to be distracted by giving them relevance. Uh, tell us, some of what you are doing, and because I have some comments I want to make about that as well.
Thank you very much, C. So
Thank you very much,
the thing that
moderator.
matter to people, so the things that matter to people, say Eddie, and for the rest of your viewers and listeners wide, is how the cattle getting saved. It's in water. How it reaching a high dam. How are we going to get a dry neighborhood for them to rest until the flood waters recede? That is what our government is busy every day with. You think we got time to listen to Alexander and his ramblings? Let's talk about a couple of the issues that we're dealing in sections. 2 Saturdays ago, I accompanied Prime Minister to Region 9, accompanied by Minister Pauline, and led by Prime Minister Phillips. Region 9, in south of Region 9, we call it South Rupununi, the place is flooded. It is rain as we have never seen before. I saw the reports that the rain is so high. They've never seen rain like this since 1981. In Tabachinga, right in the township in Tabachinga, when we went to the Takatu, it's on the water. People's houses are on the water. People need food. They need shelter. That is what we are doing. We've been down in Latem all the time. The CDC is working with the regional team down there to make sure that we provide relief for people. Let's talk about Blackbush Polar. The waters are coming in there. The people, livestock, their crops have been destroyed. It's disastrous. We got to deal with that issue. Many interventions have been placed into Region 6, especially in the area of Blackbush Polar, where it's most devastating. Let's come to Region 5. Last week I was in a place called Esau and Jacob. Down there you have hundreds upon hundreds of farmland on the water. and more coming in. We had to go and have some intervention to blinding the free flow of the water from the Myconi Creek into the farmlands. People lose hundreds of thousands of chicken. One farmer said she lose 3,000 chicken. We had to go help her with feed, paddy shell, holes. We had to go and help people. Their livelihood have been destroyed in front of their very eyes. Let's come down a little more to Myconi. In the back of Myconi, a place called Little Baibu, Big Baibu area. Same thing, the flood waters are there. Abari, we had a whole lot of cattle lost their lives in Abari because where they are, the water raised and they didn't have a high dam or a highland where they could have they could have go. We are intervening with those things. We have a lot of excavators, a lot of machine trying to do empowering and so to help farmers in those areas and bring relief to them. Let's talk about Region 4 right here in Georgetown. PNC slipping at the pump. The city flood and PNC slipping at the pump. President went out himself. These initiatives are led by President, Vice President, and Prime Minister. Ministers are out all the time. Prime Minister is out. President is out. We are out there. We are making sure that we see to every single citizen in the country. Minister Bishop Edel is in Kwakwani. Prime Minister was in Linden delivering relief to people. I'm in Region 3. Every aspect of Region 3 I walk. I had Minister Zulfi was over here, Minister Nigel, Minister Priya. The regional government is 24 hours on the ground. All the sluices are operating, a number of interventions to clear trenches, make sure the canals, the drawdown on the water that is on the land, when the tide changes, it go off quickly into the river, and then the coca lag back. So we have to put pumps now in the system to get the water out of the land. Massive destruction of crops, massive destruction of property throughout the country. Region 2, same situation. Region 1, same situation. Then you have the mobility issue. You remember most of the hinterland is Red Loom Road. When water flooded and so waiting happened, bridges are washing away, pathways are washing away, it is slush. People are moving through. So when people have these kind of problems in the country at this time, in a COVID-19 environment, you think people give a damn what Vincent Alexander and them say? People care about their livelihood. I'm being frank
But
with y'all.
we do, Minister, and I agree with you. But we do, before you go, sis, we do. I recognize that, and I understand it. But for far too long, people like Alexander and the others are allowed to do these things without being rebuffed. So I agree with you that we shouldn't spend a long time on them. But I want to, before I bring in Sase on the whole issue of the flooding, and I keep saying over and over because I see the opposition is trying to make it out as though somehow the PPP is responsible for the rains and the PPP is responsible for the high tides. I think what matters here is what you mentioned just now, the manner in which we respond. And that is what is important to people. Sase, I bring you in here.
So you see, Eddie, that's exactly what I want to talk about. It is no secret that this flooding is not a local phenomenon. It's a weather pattern that is plaguing almost the entire tropics. You see what is happening in Trinidad. You see what is happening neighboring Suriname. You see what's happening in the Amazon basin, what's happening in other parts of Brazil. So this is not something that is isolated to Guyana. But when you have persons who are focused on mischief and whose focus is to obfuscate and to create this impression that the government of the day is not performing its functions. What I appreciate, I understand that there are aspects of this infrastructure failure, etc., that of course um, could have been a slightly better managed, but you also have to factor in the state of infrastructure that the government inherited a few months ago. But that's another story. But then when you have persons going, as the old people say, with the two long hands, right, into communities to criticize, and that is juxtaposed by persons of no less than our present company, Minister Indar, who goes with his two full hands, and that is somehow criticized. And Indar, I see you've had to respond to stuff like that today. Necessarily so. That is the kind. But you see, I always say this thing, Eddie, and is something that has to be regurgitated every time because it's a little thick skull. Thick skulls it has to get into. Being in government requires a certain degree of responsibility. It is easy for an opposition parliamentarian or an opposition uh, person to go and just criticize. It is very difficult when you are in government because you have the responsibility, and quite rightly so. That is why you have been put there. And the manner in which you acquit yourselves, the manner in which you respond to these issues, the manner in which you offer solutions to persons will be the determining factor in the success or failure of the livelihood of persons. And it brings me back to what you were saying. That should be our focus. The focus should be on bringing relief to people and making persons accountable for their actions. And persons being accountable for their actions as well is the reason why we have to discuss the likes of Lowenfield, Myers, and Mingo.
Just
I think
said
I think
there.
you I before you go, Minister Indar, I think you went deeper into the point I was about to make about how we respond to this. I'm happy that you raised the point, and I want you to pointedly speak to this issue because this is the kind of opposition that we have. These are the kind of leaders that we have in the PNC. Instead of looking at how they can help to address the issues, how they can help to contribute to ensure that lives and livelihoods are protected and preserved in these circumstances. You have people playing politics. So you have Ganesh Mahipal with his usual lies out there making claims, and he was easily rebuffed. I saw you rebuffed him quite easily. Then you have Christopher Jones, and you have people like Sherrod Duncan asking people to send videos of their floods. Imagine you can use people's situation, people's suffering for narrow political purposes. Then you have Harman jumping out and running out of. Harman didn't run out any place for 5 years. I saw a poster, a meme someone made with Harman in the 5 years he was in office. He was on private jets, private yachts, and fancy places. Now he's running to the flood prone areas, the areas that are affected by floods, and he's not going there to give them anything. He is going there to accuse the PPP of not giving them and not providing for them, just to play politics and a lot of misinformation. I'll bring you in here, Minister Indar, because I know, and I think Say's touched on it as well.
Well,
You have to
well,
respond to some sides.
well. Let me tell you, right? So the issue here is that uh, the opposition leader Johama came to a place called Good Fortune, which is on Region 3 here, right? Before he came, I went with a team the morning that they flood, which is Sunday. The coca at Vreeden Hoop, at Plantain Walk there by Vreeden Hoop, was left open, and Vreeden Hoop became flooded, Plantain Walk, Good Fortune became flooded. The coca was added injury to the rainfall. So I was in the area, I walked the entire area, street by street, and meet people. The next day, we started putting together hampers donated by the private sector of Region 3 and some in Region 4. And we sent relief to people there. 120 hampers, feed, water. And so we sent people. Our team was on the ground delivering to people there. So when Mr. Harmon showed up, I don't know which part of Good Fortune he went, he said Region 3 has been forgotten. Region 3, Region 3, I can tell you, I am on the ground here every day, all day. When I'm not in somewhere else, I'm in Region 3 because this is where I live. So I had to respond to him and Mr. Mahipal today on a Facebook post. I usually don't respond to them. I'm busy working. But I responded to them. And I showed they're saying people are not getting stuff. And I showed the multiple occasion and multiple pictures where people are receiving help. Where people are receiving help. So they can try to put up their narratives and lie about flood response and flood relief and people visiting residents are affected. But there's something that we do when we go out. We take pictures of when we are out there so that the country can see that one, we're on the ground, two, we are listening to residents' concerns and what they're going through, and we are formulating as much as we can to assist them. That is what we've been doing. So they did say this thing, they did talk about it, but it's total false. Whilst they were talking that we are not and putting up posts that we are not assisting people in Region 3, we had an entire team doing flood, delivering hampers and cleaning stuff and chick feed and so on to people who lost their livestock on Sunday in Reading Hook. And the day before, we was in Belwest, and we was in Metamerzog, and we was in Good Fortune. And we continue to do it every day. Today, again, they went back in Belwest. They went to some other places. These guys, they claim that they're in opposition and they're not in government and they don't have the resources to help. But I want to speak to that too. March 2020, when they closed down the country, when they were in government and the country was in a state of stagnation, I, Deodat Indar, was on the ground with Mr. Paul Chung and a whole host of people from Region 3 giving hampers to people. And we were not in government. We were working with the private sector. We were soliciting and we were asking, we were begging, but we got relief for the people them who didn't have a job, who was locked down, who could not move to go to work and so on. We took hampers to them and their pictures to show that. Their posts to show that. So although we were at that time, we weren't in government, we were still helping. So that is not an excuse for them who just fresh out the government and don't go and help people. So I don't buy that you're not in government and you can't help. You must have friends some way. Somebody must be able to help you. But your response to flood relief cannot be just name calling. It cannot be just memes and screenshot and taking pictures of me with a glass in my hand with water inside and saying that the country is suffering and I'm having time with my rich buddies and an accusation. That cannot be the total sum of the response of the opposition to a flood in a country where they claim they have 217,000 people who vote for them. They got to do more than that. And I call upon them today to do more of that. And they could come and they could walk with me every day and see how I work and how the rest of my colleague ministers work, how we're on the ground all the time, every little nook and cranny we go to. And that is what we're doing. We are going to people and we are trying to comfort them in a time of misery. It is not easy to look at the fridge that you just buy from Courts underwater, or the furniture that you have in your house that you don't pay off yet get damaged because of the high water that sneak in 2 o'clock in the morning when you were sleeping. It is not easy. You got to go and hear the people in the country. You got to go and see them, meet with them. You just don't show up at Good Fortune or one area and get a couple pictures from somewhere and put it up and try to, say that we're not responding to it. I think it's irresponsible. It is shortchanging the Guyanese people. As an opposition, they should do better. Thank you. Eddie, you there? Eddie?
I'm not too sure the operator. I'm not too sure what happened here. Nonetheless, but you can't expect better from them, Minister. They have done that for 5 years. Walk around the place, offer nothing to people, and that is why they are where they are. They have done nothing. I wanted before I get into the final. Well, I want to touch briefly because of time. I want to touch briefly on another issue, another one of their persons playing the race card again, dealing with the GWI issue. I think tomorrow I may spend some more time in more detail to deal with that. But I just want to mention some basic facts before I ask you guys to give the closing comments about the dismissal of the workers at GWI. And I made some quick notes going through some information that was shared. So in 2015, GWI had about 700 employees. Sorry, about 600 employees. In 5 years, APNU increased that by 700 to close to about 1,300 employees. We didn't see an improvement in the quality of service that we were receiving from GWI. You had so it was woefully overstaffed. You had a lot of redundant employees. People were being paid to do nothing in many instances. GWI employment bill was $96 million in 2015. By 2020, it increased to $240 million. GWI owe GPL over $6 billion. GWI is bankrupt. GWI is in a really, really poor state. Now, why would you hiring people? I don't know if it's a case where they were just creating jobs, if it was an opportunity to hire more people, but at the same time they were siphoning off the monies, or whatever it is. The fact of the matter is, uh, based on all the information that is available, is that GWI is being restructured to be a more effective, efficient agency or utility to provide quality service to the people of this country. So I just wanted to throw that in. What I'll do though, I will come back maybe tomorrow to address more in detail the issue of GWI. But before I ask for your closing comments, I found this video on social media, and I think it's a very interesting video to put into perspective. I know Minister Indar is not too keen on going back to this, but I want to share this video of Alexander, and this is how easily some of these guys can be exposed. Before I ask for your closing comments, let's take a look at this. Guys, could we get that video there before? All right, so the guys are getting some problems there with the video. But if I tell you quickly before I ask for your closing comments, is one, Alexander is somehow trying to pour cold water on the motion, but someone took the liberty or took the pains to cut Alexander's claims or his attempts to pour cold water to say that one of the things is that the lady Myers is accused of facilitating a candidate at Ashman's building. And as soon as he's finished with that, the person put the video of Myers actually facilitating Karen Cummings at the Ashman's building to attack the international observers. The other claim he made, I think, is that there's an allegation that Myers instructed and used the Guyana police force to put out a GECOM commission. I think Sase were that commissioner, and some other PUP reps from the Ashman's building. The person placed the video there showing her actually doing it. So really wanted to share the video. Nonetheless, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to give you Minister Indar and Says I'll give you a chance to make your closing comments maybe in 2 minutes, and then you, Minister Indar, to wrap things up.
All right, Eddie, like I said, while I appreciate the comments of Minister Ndar in relation to not being distracted by the attempts to obfuscate by the opposition elements and the likes of Alexander, it's important. You remember at Jonestown, there's an infamous sign over the temple of Jim Jones that says, "Those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it." Um, the facts speak for themselves. When you look at the documentation and the memorialization of these events, it requires no much elaborate discussion on it to glean what really occurred and what was attempted and what was the intention. And we see that even in opposition now, that is being perpetuated. Um, and I would actually take the admonition of Indar and pass it on to the rest of our viewers. Stay focused, be wary of the attempts to misguide you, be wary, be wary of the attempts to distract you. We are in trying times, and times are getting even more trying. We are existing in the state in the event in the era of a pandemic. Thankfully, the vaccination campaign of this country is, I believe, superior to many other countries, and that's something we have to be thankful for. And we have to stay focused to ensure, but to ensure that the livelihood of all is secured. But we also must not be distracted or lose focus of the nonsense that is happening around us.
Minister Indar.
Thank you. So first, thank you guys for having me on tonight. But I'm convinced that once people like Myers, Mingo, and Lowenfield, and I saw the private sector and the Chamber of Commerce, and those came out applauding the move to remove them. Whilst they are still in GECOM, no one should expect free and fair election. We just been through a horrendous period where you had 144 countries said and signed off and called that the PPP won the elections through the various bodies like the OAS and the rest of them. And you have this political party in Guyana saying they won the election. Can't show the SOPs. You had to go to court and get court orders for them now to show it. Once they're there, we will not have free and fair elections. They got to go. And we must demand them be moved. The place have to reform, right? The place of GECOM have to be reformed. They got a lot of things going on there that you can't even speak in public. It's so shameful. But nevertheless, we have to, the ones that were blatantly out there doing wrongdoing, they have to be accountable for their actions. And I'm right to say that in my closing comments that we have sometimes when they talk these things and say these things, we have to deal with them frontally. We can't, skirt the issue and talk about something else. I know I talk about the flood and so on. But with these matters are of national importance. The country was under siege for 5 months because of their inaction, because of their action and inaction in certain times, right? Sase and I and the rest of us everybody was in the Ashman's building. We were in the struggle. We were in the recount. So we know what we're talking about. This is now we are here, say, this is what we have been through. So people like Alexander and them, we have to make sure that when they speak like these statements that they recently make about racism is a motivating factor, we have to make sure that we call them out and deal with them condignly and hold their feet to the fire. So I just want to say that for whatever it's worth. And with respect to the GWI workers, Eddie, is not just GWI alone. Many institutions are stacked with workers that increased the payroll cost from 2015 to now. They're stacked up. The payroll numbers went up tremendously, including GPL too, and some of the other agencies on the public works and much more large in the government. GWI is just a glaring eye opener, but they have plenty others a lot of people went in there. And you rightly ask, where is the increased efficiency? I'm still waiting to see it. Right? We are trying with what we have, but I think that you got to make sensible decisions. Those organizations, they limp along. They have large stock of debt on their balance sheets, right? And you have to make sure that they operate efficiency. The operational efficiency is there. You can't just have a whole lot of staff and they're not seeing the benefits of them. So I guess you're gonna have a more explosive conversation tomorrow with that. But I'm saying that if the numbers went up, lopsided in the past 5 years, you have to review it and you have to make hard decisions. You have to. Thank you very much for having me on tonight, Eddie. And Sis, thank you for being such a for taking over the hosting of the thing. I don't know what Eddie doing these. Eddie talking about one man all the time, and we got big problems in the country.
Continue the good work in the
It's
fields
always
and that necessary to bring relief.
it's always Sase's dream and I'll probably speak to him someday as he takes over this program permanently. Yeah. But gentlemen, again, I want to thank you. And before I wrap, I want to just encourage. I know people are suffering as a result of the floods, but I want to encourage, Guyanese to, at the same time, let us not lose sight of the fact that we are in a pandemic. Um, COVID-19 is still there. And I want to encourage you, those of you who have not yet taken your vaccines, to please get vaccinated. Vaccines are available. The first dose is available. The second dose will be available for the Sputnik very soon. Um, for those who are due for the second dose, so please take your vaccines. Mask up, social distance, sanitize. Let us not lose sight. And to those persons who are suffering as a result of flooding in their areas, rest assured that As a government, we are doing everything possible to bring relief to you, to protect your lives and to protect your livelihoods. I've been repeatedly calling on you to maybe make contact with the Civil Defense Commission and let them know your situation so that the necessary help, necessary assistance can be brought to you. So we'll be back with you tomorrow evening. Until then, we say thanks for being part of the program. And to the two gentlemen who joined me, Sase Gunraj as well as Minister Indar. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to always have you on this program.
Pleasure to be here, Eddie. Thank you.